is Friday. It is Tesvav Tevis, Tavshin Ayin Gimel, and we are in Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim, Tavshin Yud Aleph, Tavshin Yud Beis, at the end of the Mamar of Purim Vekibel Hayehudim, Tavshin Yud Aleph. We are in the process of discussing the reason why it was necessary to have actual self-sacrifice in order to bring Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, to its state of completeness. Without actual self-sacrifice, the giving of the Torah was incomplete. And that is the meaning of Vekibel Hayehudim, as the Jews accepted upon themselves during Purim that which they began to do at Sinai. And the point is that Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, needs to find expression in the very lowest dimension and fused with the very highest levels of godliness. The Chibur of the Elyon V'Tachtenim, the ultimate fusion between the highest realms and the lowest. And that can only take place when there is actual self-sacrifice. Why? Because so long as there was potential self-sacrifice, which was actually included in what the Jews said when they said Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear at Sinai. So when they said we will do, it was unconditional, even if self-sacrifice would be necessary. However, that was only potential. There wasn't any actual self-sacrifice. So because it was only potential, that means that the self-sacrifice then was mitzad haneshama, driven by the soul. It was from the soul's perspective. The soul had the determination to say, under all circumstances. In order for Matan Torah to actually permeate the body as well, the body, i.e. the natural soul and the body, the lowest element of the human being, you need actual self-sacrifice. Because in our world, Elam ha'asiyah, actuality, is what is required to determine that it's there. And that happened at Purim. Now we're in the process of discussing, we're on page Mem Vov, in middle of the second part of chapter 10, chapter Yud, in middle of the V'al Pi Zeh. I think we'll start from the beginning again, from V'al Pi Zeh. Now the Rebbe is discussing the difference between the self-sacrifice of Chanukah and the self-sacrifice of Purim. Why is it specifically the self-sacrifice that the Jews had on Purim that brought Matan Torah to a state of completeness, rather than the self-sacrifice that the Jews had during Chanukah? And it's not only, as mentioned before, because Purim happened chronologically before, but rather because there's an inherent difference between the self-sacrifice of Purim and the self-sacrifice of Chanukah. And the point is, just to say it by heart, before we go inside, that the self-sacrifice of Chanukah was, even though their lives were threatened, but it wasn't a direct threat to their physical life. The decree was against fulfilling mitzvahs in a godly way. The decree was to remove God, to remove the divine from the fulfillment of mitzvahs, from the learning of Torah. La'ashkicham teirasecho. What bothered the Greeks was that the Jewish people considered Torah God's Torah. And to make them transgress the statutes of your will. They had nothing against learning Torah, fulfilling mitzvahs. So long as it was done for civil reasons or for intellectual pursuit, that's fine. The divine aspect of it, the divinity of the Torah and mitzvahs, the godly dimension, that's what was troubling them. And they said, and as a result of that, they said, look, they made a ban on certain mitzvahs, particularly those that had to do with more with the idea of chukim, or those that showed more identity to the concept of God. And if you and a byproduct of that was that the lives of Jews were threatened if they were to fulfill those mitzvahs. But it wasn't a direct threat. The point wasn't so much threatening the lives of the Jews. Rather, the threat was, the opposition was to the mitzvahs, to the godly mitzvahs, to the Chanukah. Whereas on Purim, it was Lahashmid Laragal Abed Vekibel Hayehudim. The decree was to destroy the Jewish people. Okay, so that's what. So in other words, in Hanukkah, the emphasis is still more on the soul, and the self-sacrifice is like an additional element. Whereas on Purim, it was far more directed towards the actual physical existence of the Jew. Far more tachtim. Therefore, it was specifically Purim that brought about the actual shleimus, completeness, wholesomeness into the process of Matan Torah, inside. According to this, we will also understand the advantage that the self-sacrifice of Purim has over the self-sacrifice of Hanukkah. In what way was it greater? Because when we speak about actual self-sacrifice, it's still mainly because of the soul. In other words, what were we saying before? That when the Jews said Naaseh at Sinai, we will do under all circumstances. Since it's only in potential, since they did not face the threat, that relates to self-sacrifice of the soul. The soul declares its commitment. Similarly, when we speak about actual self-sacrifice, who drives it? The soul drives it. It's the soul that's committed to get lakait, and that influences the nefesh hativus, the natural soul, and the body to go along. Right? Even when we talk about actual self-sacrifice, it's mainly from the soul. It's just that the self-sacrifice of the soul affects also the body. We're talking about the soul over here, but we're talking about the godly soul. The godly soul affects also the body and the natural soul. And since the body and the natural soul, so far as they are concerned, do exist, they are a separate entity on their own, as opposed to the soul, who is completely that is completely committed, as opposed to the godly soul, whose whole being is godliness. Therefore, the revelation of Matan Torah, which in other words means the fusion of the upper realms and the lower ones, which comes down through the nullification, which comes as a result of self-sacrifice, which emanates from the godly soul, which is driven by the godly soul, as just spelled out. So therefore, that self-sacrifice, as far as the body and the natural soul are concerned, it's like something additional to them. It's not natural for them. It's an added element. It's something which is introduced to them. By whom? By the soul. So therefore we need to get, what's the point? We need to get to a state of self-sacrifice which is as much as possible related to the soul, to the body, and to the natural soul. And that's Purim. This is the special quality, this is the advantage. This is what the self-sacrifice of Purim has over the self-sacrifice of Hanukkah. Why? On Purim, Jews were in the lowest state, also from the perspective of the body, so far as the body is concerned. Why? They were completely abandoned to be killed by anyone that desired. And through the laws of nature, through natural circumstances, there was no way for them to be saved from this. We were discussing yesterday whether there was an exit or not. So this is what the Rebbe addresses in the brackets. If you remember, the Rebbe quoted from Torah Ur in the beginning of the Mamar that there was an exit. That any Jew that would convert during Purim would not be part of the Geseda of Lahashmed Laragal Abed, would not be part of the decree. So why are we saying over here that they were abandoned? So let's see how the Rebbe describes this.
In Hanukkah also they couldn't convert it.
Correct. But you're differentiating between Hanukkah and Purim to say what? That on Hanukkah it was more connected to the soul? Okay, so that I understand. There's an exit, fine. But on Purim, you're saying that it was directed against the body, but there was an exit. Right?
I thought there wasn't an exit on Purim.
Well, the Rebbe quoted in chapter 1, all the way in the beginning, quotes from Torah, he says clearly, well, he should be im hayu memirim dosam chas v'shalom lo hayu oisam lem klum. The Alter Rebbe says clearly in Torah that if they would have converted, nothing would have been done to them. Right? So what? So
I think that's the necessity for the serious nefesh, because they could have escaped the situation and they didn't. So it's part of the serious nefesh.
so it's greater Mesiras Nefesh, but that's true. But however, the point that we're trying now to emphasize is the fact that what the threat was against the body, against the physical existence of the Jew, rather than the neshama, rather than the mitzvah aspect. How does that go along with the fact that they had an exit if they would convert? That's what the Rebbe addresses in the brackets. You're right that in terms of the Mesiras Nefesh, it was a greater Mesiras Nefesh because they had an exit that they didn't take it up, right? But still, we have an issue here. It would seem with the fact that it was focused on the guf and the nefesh ativis, on the physical existence of the Jew. So that's what the Rebbe addresses in the brackets. Although the decree was only on the Jewish people. And if they would have denied God's existence, God forbid, heaven forbid. In other words, if they would have denied, if they would have changed their religion, if they were converted, nothing would have been done to them. As brought in this Maimon itself earlier in chapter 1 from Torah Alter Rebbe. So what's the question? So it seems to cause a problem with this explanation that we're saying now, we're giving now, that on Purim the emphasis was far more on the body than on the soul, unlike Hanukkah. Mikol Mokim, says the Rebbe, Mekivin Shagzera Oz Hoysa Loyal Kiyam Atera Mitzvahs Ela Halaguf La Regula Abed Chas V'Shalom. Since then, when then? At Purim, what was the decree? The decree was not against the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. The decree was against the body. That it was straightforward. It was directly. The decree was to destroy, God forbid, the Jewish people, to annihilate the Jewish people, God forbid. Nimtza shagufim shalahem hayu az b'tachas hashiflos. So this means that the body of the Jewish people, the body of any Jew, was then completely abandoned. It was at the lowest level. The kasher agzeri al Torah mitzvahs k'mei b'chanukah shagzeri yisrael shkichem Torah sachem ulavinu mechukid tzinecha. When the decree is against Torah and mitzvahs, don't learn Torah, don't fulfill mitzvahs, as it was during Hanukkah, when the Greeks' decree was to make Jews forget Torah and to make them transgress God's mitzvahs. What's the decree? If I fulfill Torah mitzvahs, if a Jew fulfills Torah mitzvahs, then he has a physical threat against him. Azai, what does that mean? Then, the body, so far as the perspective of the body is concerned, is not completely abandoned. Why? Because the focus is don't fulfill Torah mitzvahs. What's the consequence if I do fulfill Torah mitzvahs? There's an existential threat. There's a threat against my existence. But that's a result of what? Of the gzeira, of the decree against me fulfilling Torah mitzvahs. But when the decree is, heaven forbid, to kill and to annihilate the Jewish people. But he has a way to get out of it. By how? By denying his Yiddishkeit. So in that case, since the decree to kill this Jew, God forbid, is not because he refuses to deny his Yiddishkeit, but rather the decree is against his existence. He has an exit by denying Yiddishkeit. But what's the direct threat? The direct threat is against the person's existence, the Jew's existence. So then, the decree is al haguf, on the body. So that the result is that the body, so far as the body is concerned, is completely abandoned. In other words, the question is, against what is the direct threat? The fact that there is an exit, that's secondary. What was the threat? What was the gzeira? What was the decree? During Chanukah, the decree was, Lashkicham teirasecha v'lavinam chukir. Do not learn Torah as God's Torah. Do not fulfill mitzvahs as God's mitzvahs. That was the decree. If you agree, it's good.
They could have stayed as Jews.
Sorry?
They could have stayed as Jews, you mean?
They could exist.
They could, well, whatever the decree was, fulfilled. I don't know if they could. If they told Jews to convert, what kind of Yiddishkeit would it be if you would take away Milah and Shabbos and all these mitzvahs? But the threat was, what was the decree? The decree was, what was the gzeira? The gzeira was, do not fulfill Torah as God's Torah. Do not learn Torah as God's Torah. Do not fulfill mitzvahs as God's mitzvahs. So what was hefker? What were they challenging? They were challenging the neshama of Jews. What's the consequence of that challenge? If a Jew goes along with it, fine. If not, they threaten the Jews' lives.
It was more like the connection to God that they were.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, in other words, what was under threat more? The neshama.
Yeah.
What happened at Purim? At Purim, they said, what did Haman say? I want to destroy all the Jewish people. Full stop. That was the decree. What was the wording of the decree? Lahashmid la'regal abed es kol Hayehudim. To annihilate, God forbid, all the Jews. That was the decree.
Or even the continuation. So so almost similarly to more recent times, there was an annihilation,
Right.
wipe out, and anyone associated even.
Correct. I mean, in more recent events, it was even worse because there was no exit at all. I don't want to. That's a completely. I mean, I wouldn't even attempt to try to explain that.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's focus on Purim. We're talking about Purim bringing Matan Torah to its state of completion, to its shleimus. What was the threat? The threat was against the Jewish people. The existence of the Jewish people. Lahashmid la'regal abed es kol Hayehudim. It just happened to be there was a PS. If you decide to convert, to leave Yiddishkeit, God forbid, so then you're no longer part of the decree because it's against the Jews. But what was the focus? What was cast as hefker? What was abandoned here? The bodies of the Jewish people. In the footnote, the Rebbe says something. He makes a point, although it's a bit of a subtle point. But in footnote 81, the Rebbe says there's actually a practical halachic consequence of these 2 points. What's under threat? We know that there are 3 mitzvahs that a Jew has to, if he's threatened, Yehareg Val Yaver, if it says if a Jew is threatened concerning these 3 mitzvahs, either you transgress them, or God forbid, one's life is taken. You have to allow yourself to have your life taken. Which are the 3 mitzvahs? Avodah Zarah, Gilei Arayis, and Shvichas Damim, right? Idolatry, adultery, and the spilling of blood, murder. If somebody says, go and murder another person, otherwise your life will be taken, you have to allow yourself to be killed, as opposed to, rather than taking somebody else's life. What happens if this person couldn't withstand the pressure, and he went ahead and he transgressed one of these 3 mitzvahs? He was under threat, and then he couldn't withstand the pressure, and he transgressed. Does one get punished? We know that if you transgress mitzvahs, there are consequences. So the Rambam paskins, he doesn't get punished. Why? Because he's einus. When does one get punished? When one does it wantonly. But when one does, or b'shegeg, you have to bring a kapara. But when it's einus, when you're forced, when you're compelled, and you can't withstand that situation, you don't get punished. However, says the Rambam, what happens if a person is ill? And the only way to cure this person is through transgressing one of these 3 mitzvahs. One of these 3 mitzvahs. You're not allowed to. All other mitzvahs you transgress to preserve a person's life, besides these 3. What happens if, in that situation, again, one transgressed and cured oneself through one of these mitzvahs, through transgressing one of these three, the din is he gets punished. He's an onus. It's not only that there's the benefit from it. The fundamental difference is precisely this. What is the threat? When one says, murder somebody or your life will be taken. So the direct issue is what? The shvichas damim. Right? When you say the person is ill, you can save yourself through one of these three, so then what's the issue? The issue is the person's illness. So where is the onus dimension? In the first one, the onus dimension, the compulsion aspect is direct. In the illness situation, the compulsion is the illness. And this is the byproduct. That's why in the former, there's no punishment, if he transgressed. And in the latter, there is. So there's a practical difference in halacha. The bottom line is that when it came to Purim, the threat was far more directly connected and focused on the existence of the Jew. The fact that there was an exit was by the way. In Hanukkah, it was the other way around. The threat was against the spirituality of the Jewish people. You could get around that. Claude? More about that mitzvah on Sunday.